quite the talent he is. Proper chatterbox yada. If you're keen, it'll be brilliant. Today, we're going to keep it simple. I'll bark out a basic command and you watch. Keen to know? He'll set your tail wagging. Does mine, hence why I'm backing him. Right then, Wookie here. Do take a seat, won't you? Give us your full attention while we listen to my pal, Yada.
Always glad to have the Wookiees endorsement. Endorsements hard to come by these days. Sometimes I wonder what would happen if I actually exposed the viewers of this program, the readers of these books, to what I have to endure day in and day out from all of the nutcases out there. There are so many people who, because of the things that I have done, I mean, it is a very unique life, not only from a business point of view, but then from the perspective of being the only person to have excoriated Islam to the extent that I have and lived through it, to writing the most comprehensive books ever to prove Jesus never existed, to being the first to make an amplified translation using the Dead Sea Scrolls as the basis, and then to write 35 books that profoundly change how we come to understand and know God. And having done tens of thousands of radio programs over that period of time, a lot of people who have listened to me over the years and have learned, but not learned enough. And it's as if during that time they're having a relationship with me when I don't even know who these people are. Then occasionally they'll come out of the woodwork and they'll write a letter and you go, say what? How did you get from here to there? Wow. I just tell you that it is every day. There is something that you just shake your head and say, oh man, am I ever glad that Yahowah is supportive. Because if he wasn't, this would be the most impossible job in the world. I keep on looking at Rich because the most recent one I sent to him for analysis, and we're just both shaking our heads.
Can't fix stupid.
Oh, this person wasn't stupid.
No, that was the scary part.
It's actually a reasonably smart individual that isn't rational. So we're going to return to Yahowah's name. This is now the 8th program on basics on Yahowah's name. We're about halfway through the material that I have isolated for it. And while we very quickly cut to the chase and explained how Yahowah introduced himself, why he only has one name, what that one name is, and how I prove that it is pronounced Yahowah, and why it is essential for us to use it. We've spent these additional programs speaking of so many things around it, surrounding Yahowah's name, that add just layers of depth and understanding to this single most important topic there is. So rather than just doing 2 or 3 programs on Yahowah's name, telling you this is how he introduced himself in the Torah, this is the basis and the meaning of the name, and this is proof how to pronounce Yahowah's name, since it is essential to our well-being and to the restoration of Yisrael, to the return of Yahudah. Now, I'm pleased that we're going to do this rather deep dive and talk about other related subjects to his name. And it always brings us to interesting passages. We've just moved through some of those in Hosea, which are compelling because God is making an interesting reference to Baal as a husband and what that means. And then we moved into one of the most famous prophecies of all, Yirmiyah 31, where Yahowah actually says that he was the Baal, the husband to the covenant family. And one in Hosea, he says that rather than referring to him as husband any longer, that the time will come when God's most important man will reemerge, and the emphasis is that that we will begin to view him as the ultimate husband, and that is because when he returns, he's going to be marrying Yisrael, because Hosea was the divorce of Yisrael. Yahweh was not going to remarry his bride, but his son will. And it's a marvelous story in this regard. And hopefully we will expand this program by covering all of the book of Ruth, because it is, as Rich was sharing this morning, we've gone and been talking about it so much. It is the ultimate expression of how to live within the covenant of two people who are clearly covenant, engaged in it, care deeply about it, and are devoted to the kinsman redeemer. And so we'll explore that too, because there are so many profoundly important insights about the nature of this covenant relationship, which is the crown jewel of the universe and of the Torah.
It's also a Lifetime movie network love story.
Oh, it is. The story of Boaz and Ruth is the ultimate love story, and it has so many twists and turns and wonderful moments and flashbacks, and it is the ultimate story of being prophetic of the Messiah becoming the Redeemer and giving birth to the Messiah as the Redeemer. And Christians have been just crazed over what prophecies they could steal to give credibility to their man God, Jesus. And yet this is, I think, I'm looking over here at Rich to my right, managing the program. This is the ultimate prophecy regarding the delivery of the kinsman redeemer.
Yep.
And it becomes so obvious, and as you go through it, that Dode, when he returned, and they were the great grandparents of Dode. Their son's name, of course, was Obed, who was the one that salvaged the. And it's not the same Obed, but same name, the one who salvaged the delivery of the Ark of the Covenant on Dode's behalf, as it got moved into Jerusalem, and when a man by the same name, not the same man, will do it again here in a number of years. But when you read the story that takes place, several things are obvious, and one is that Dode had natural parents, and probably 1 to 2 BCE, when he was reborn to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakurim, and that his natural parents were Ruth and Boaz, and that Ruth and Boaz have returned. They are characters that God has inserted, will have inserted, I think already has inserted 7 times, and there will be an 8th in his timeline, in his story. And that those who are listening to these programs know both Ruth and Boaz quite well. Anyway, let's return to Yirmiyah 31. It says, "For this reason, this is the covenant family." It says, Habareth, the family-oriented relationship agreement, which to enjoy the benefits of this relationship, Asher, I will cut and establish with the house of Yisrael. We went back through, because of what we learned in the 31st and final word picture, the proverb. We went back and reconsidered what Ethan Haas Rocky collaborated with Yahowah in the writing the prose of the 89th Mizmor. And in it, when Yahweh first speaks in the Psalm, he tells us that he karat the bereth with dot. That he karat the bereth with dot. And so he did it on behalf of the house of Israel. Well, this is a very important designation. Now, this is Yirmiyah. Yirmiyah was written 200 to 300 years after Ethan Ha-Izraki collaborated with Yahowah on the 89th Mizmor. It's explaining it. For this reason, this is the covenant, which, to enjoy the benefits of the relationship, I will cut and establish with the house of Israel. After that, and without hesitation in the end, akar means the end, the conclusion of things, prophetically declares Yahweh. And I will provide placing my Torah, my guidance and teaching within them. So those who are part of this restoration of the covenant, which is with Yisrael and with Yahudim, when Yahweh returns with dot, are going to have the Torah teaching, instructions, and directions of Yahweh written within them. Now, you might say, well, that sounds pretty good, but what does that mean altogether? And if you don't know what it means, then it doesn't really do any good for me to tell it to you, does it? What does it mean? It means that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam are for shit. That's what it means. God's not writing the Quran, the Talmud, or the New Testament in them. And by going right back to his original owner's manual, if you will, then there is no justification for ever having a New Testament, a Talmud, or a Quran. So that's one thing. That's a pretty significant thing. What's the second thing? Well, for God to impose, it's a stronger word, isn't it, than write, but to impose. And he says, I'm going to write it inside of you. He's imposing his Torah upon us. That everybody that will be participating in the renewal and restoration of the covenant with Yahweh will want this. They will ask God for it. They will desire it. There will be nobody who doesn't want God's Torah integrated into their very nature. So that means we're not talking about today. We're talking about, well, Akar already told us, times in the end. And that we're not going to have a lot of people then. We're going to have very few relatively to what we know today, because all the people who would prefer the Talmud or the New Testament or the Quran or none of the above won't be around. Only people who have chosen to be part of the covenant through the Torah are going to be present. Now, what does this also mean? It also means that since God says there's a difference between the way that the covenant was experienced during the Exodus, when he drug the children of Israel out of Mitzrayim, what he says is a firm hand. It's chazak. Chazak is a lot more than firm. Chazak tells us God's overall preference and how he handles recalcitrant people. And if you're going to be belligerent towards God, if you're going to challenge what he has to say, or even the people through whom he is going to say it, he wants that response to be chazak. Doesn't fit the letter very well that we received today, who claimed that, no, you need to be humble and accommodating. No. You're supposed to be shazak. And if you don't want to be shazak, then God has no use for you, because shazak means firm to the point of being fierce, unaccommodating, strong, steadfast, unwavering, uncompromising, tough as nails, like a bull in a china closet. Bull in the china closet doesn't say, hey, little teacup over there, you might want to duck so that you don't get gored with my horns when I turn around. You know, not what happens. It doesn't make an apology to the plate that it stamps out because Will was the wrong place at the wrong time. Shouldn't put a bull in a damn china closet anyway. What are they thinking about? All right, so what's the difference? God is not going to, with the firm hand, he says, I am not going to put my Torah guidance inside of the beneficiaries of the renewal of the covenant with a firm hand. I'm not going to be Chazak this time. What's the opposite of Shazak? That means rather than God having to pull people kicking and screaming in such a way that they can't even free themselves from his overwhelming force, it's going to be the opposite of that. That those who have the Torah written inside are going to be there of their own free will, not just there of their own free will. They're going to be so devoted to Yahowah. They're going to be begging, yes, please, me. I'm right here. Open me up. I want it. I need it. Let's go. Can't wait for it. So God can't do it now because he can't violate free will. And he can do it then because everybody will be of the same mind. That's a lot to learn from one passage. And integrate it into their ability to make decisions. I will write it. Wa'al lebhem. And of course, the numbskulls of religious publications will say, I'll write it on their heart. I'm going to tell you that there will not be a single heart that is tattooed. By the way, God's opposed to tattoos. So no. No tattoos on the heart. And by the way, the heart would be a really lousy surface for one to write the words of the Torah, would it not? Hard to read inside the heart, isn't it? And not much of a surface to write on. So no, you've got to think. This is just simple. Leb in the Hebrew mindset and in most languages at the time meant seat of judgment. So I will integrate it within their ability to make intelligent decisions. I will help frame their inclinations and their disposition, their character and thinking, their hearts and minds. I was speaking to one of my closest friends, dearest friends, this morning, and I have known this man in the best of times and the worst of times. And he had some time ago gone through the worst of times, and a man that I thought was unshakable became quite depressed. And as my dear friend, I took it upon myself to say, we're going to resolve this because I know the man that is actually in there. And over the course of a couple of years, the man that I had invested so much of my life with went from depressed to exceedingly happy. And what you see before you when you go to yadayah.com, and the fact that you saw virtually nothing take place on that site from the time that we left the malcontents that were previously playing roles within the covenant and have subsequently excluded themselves, to the time that we went to an entirely new website, was a better part of a year. And it wasn't because I hadn't designed it. I had come up with all the layers that you see in it between blogs and chat and the books and the interactive nature now with chat and timeline, all of it. I not only perceived, I wrote it on a piece of paper, Kirkian style, and distributed it. But the issue was that my friend was still while he was making tremendous contributions elsewhere, he was still struggling. And some time ago, he just had an amazing transformation. His ability to make decisions, his inclinations, his attitude, his disposition changed. The darkness all went away. It was like, light. And what you see now at Yahowah.com, it is an expression of that. God really likes positive attitudes. He loves beaming confidence. He loves big smiles. He loves rainbows. I'm sure that God's favorite flower is the plumeria. Just saying. Might be the bougainvillea, but we'll find out soon enough. God loves life. He does. And the thing that he wants to avoid are curmudgeons. He doesn't want to be surrounded by people who are miserable. And so he's going to integrate his very uplifting Torah inside of us, in our seat of judgment, where our inclinations and disposition are as bright and beaming as are our God's. So that's where he's going to write it. And as a result, Yahweh says, I will be their God, and they will be my family. That's the ultimate conclusion of what God is trying to achieve. We will have his stamp of approval. Of course, now in this first statement, this message was directed to Israelites, if you recall 31:31, and to Yehudim. As we progressed, the audience was reaffirmed when God spoke of your fathers being brought out of Mitzrayim. This remnant, with whom becomes essential members of the covenant family, are largely Israelites. Then the identity of those slated for restoration is refined as Yisrael, of those individuals who engage and endure with God. Because of their reconciliation with Yehudim, you don't need to mention both anymore. They've been reconciled, and Yehudim are a subset of Yisrael. Therefore, the preeminent pronouncement required by Christians to justify their New Testament clearly does not apply to them. But by the same token, with the incorporation of the Torah into the lives of God's children, the Talmud toters are also excluded. Not my Wookiee, who is getting his fill of my iced tea. Hope I don't get a scratchy throat as we go through the show. You fill yourself up there, young man, and enjoy. Yahweh's family is a place where there are no political parties and there are no religious sects. Yahweh has also affirmed this prophecy applies to Akar, which is the last days, and not to the creation of a church or a New Testament 2,000 and 1,900 years ago, or to the return of Jews to Israel 80 years ago. The end of the world is awash in religion and politics, and one has to be cleansed of these corruptions. And for the remnant of Israel, that cleansing, which enables them to receive the Torah of Yahweh, occurs in the fall of 2033, which is year 6,000 Yah. Now, the restoration of the covenant is not just with Israel. In fact, the covenant wasn't cut with Israel. It wasn't announced via Israel. The first indication we have of the covenant and its affirmation was a fellow named Noach. Noach wasn't a Jew, was he?
Nope.
No, not in the least. And the next time that the covenant is discussed, it's discussed with a fellow named Abram. And last time I checked, he was a Babylon.
Boy, Babylonian.
He was a Babylonian, wasn't he? And so is his wife. So the covenant will be reaffirmed with both Israelites and with the Goyim. And collectively, that's why Yahowah says there's one Torah for everybody. And this is radically different than anything God has done previously, because it means now that the Torah can no longer be rejected. You can't annul it. You can't amend it. You can't abridge it. Now, you can still have somebody explain it to you. I will, I guess, go to right to the end to tell you that the Torah has been available to read for 3,500 years. And until Yahowah inspired me to create this Yada Yahowah series of books explaining how the Torah is to be understood and applied to your life, no one could. So the explanations will still be needed, even with those who have a copy of the book written inside of them. I'm not going to lose my day job. But the rabbis sure as hell will, as will the pastors and the priests and the religious scholars. Now, since free will persist, preferring the Talmud or New Testament will be excluded. And that means that by accepting Yahweh, a person is agreeing to have their choices influenced by God's guidance, and only through God's instructions. And oh, by the way, that is absolutely necessary. The whole idea of God empowering and enabling the covenant members to transcend from 3 to 7 dimensions is such an increase in capability that if you were not receptive to his guidance, then you would be a danger to yourself and others. So it must be this way. And that is why it is being written on our leb, hearts and minds, using that leb symbolically of seat of judgment, such that it is integrated into our decision-making process, while it influences our inclinations and our disposition. The point of all of this is to increase and enhance the size, well, not so much the size, but the quality of Yahweh's family. I don't think God's much into size. Size doesn't seem to matter with God. Quality does. And this means that the Torah, which makes covenant participation possible, is going to be the center of our lives. Now, should you be curious as to why Yahowah will be able to integrate his Torah guidance and teaching into the lives of his covenant family at this juncture, but could not do so previously, the answer, of course, is free will. Had God sought to place his Torah inside of the Israelites 3,500 years ago, it would have been against their will and would have precluded anyone from rejecting him, which is incompatible with a loving relationship, incompatible with choice. However, now that every recipient has arrived at their own discretion and has chosen to be directed by the Torah, it is the perfect adjunct to guide us back to the garden and through the expansive realm of space-time and into the 7th dimension. But I want to make something very clear. Everyone does not mean everyone here. Everyone here means everyone who has been restored within the covenant. The remnant who will be returned to Jerusalem, the remnant who will be purged of the religious and political guilt, the remnant who are still mortal, who will enter the millennial celebration of the Shabbat, are not yet covenant. And God is not committing to writing his Torah inside of them at this point. This is a reboot. This is a do-over. This is God going into the year 6,000 Yah to 7,000 Yah with a clean slate, but now having a core group of people, covenant members, in whom he has written a copy of his Torah, guiding this mortal remnant through the next 1,000 years so that God can determine and discern which of those individuals are observant, which means they're not looking inside. They got to look at that Torah outside, observant, responsive, that they are reliable, because he only wants to empower those with added dimensionality that he can trust. So there will still be free will. And the majority of people who exist upon Kippurim and enter Sukkah will not be among those who have the Torah placed inside of them. But their guides will, without exception. It's just that there won't be a lot of them. So, however, now that every recipient is part of this renewal of the covenant, God can do so. So, please don't miss the fact that even now, it is the Torah that is being written inside of us. This is a frontal assault, of course, on against the absurd rabbinical argument in favor of their oral Torah, their Babylonian Talmud. Further to this point, since Yisrael's long anticipated return to Yahowah culminates with the incorporation of Yahowah's written Torah, there is no validity to a New Testament. God's message has not changed. His people have. And they will need to change again to be part of the remnant enjoying this day, and then benefit from the Torah to become part of the covenant. As a result of the restoration and the integration of that Yahowah intends, there will be a marvelous transformation, the complete elimination of religious, political, and conspiratorial guilt and jargon. We will all yada Yahowah. This says, they will not teach any longer as an individual man to his fellow countrymen or his companions, nor as an individual person to his brother. To approach, say, choose of your own accord to yada Yahowah. How do you like that one?
Right there in black and white.
It is. For indeed, every one of them, they will yada me, being like yada with me. As a result of their katan. I'll return to katan in a moment. I'll just let it linger there for a jiff. And as the restoring witness, the odd, to the eternal testimony of their Gadol. I'll let that hang in the air for a moment too. Prophetically reveals in advance of it is occurring, Yahowah, Yirmiyah. Yah lifts up Jeremiah 31:34. Oh my goodness, did you just hear what that said? What did God say? I received another letter where somebody was inferring that, not inferring that, overtly stating that the work I have done to translate the Torah, prophets, and Psalms should not have been done alone. And that the work to write and edit all of these books, all of which are Yahowah, all of which are written by that guy down there. It shouldn't have been that way. Should have been a committee. And committee would make it better. I think God is saying nixnay on the committee here.
That's what the religious do.
Yeah.
Let's form a committee.
God's saying nixnay on the committee. You know, when God revealed the original Torah, was there a committee?
No.
I think so. When it was Moshe, when God said, you know, we're gonna make an ark here. We're gonna make an ark. I want a committee. Can somebody form a committee? Or did he speak to Noah? When God said, you know, okay, we're gonna check out this man thing to see whether or not this human thing will work. You know, an animal with a conscience. Let's get a what do you call a group of men? Would that be a flock, a gaggle, a brood? Let's get a bunch of them together and let's see if one of them can figure it out.
If you can get past their egos.
And I think not. When God said, "Oh, you know, I think we need a king for my people. I don't really like what they're doing with Shaul. I think we need a king." But why? You know, if 10 is better than 1, right? Let's get a committee. No. Did God say, you know, Yasha, you're a smart dude, man. You got a great vocabulary. We could really state some profound things together. We could probably cover the entire turf of human history and delineate prophecy right to the end. But you know, you're just one dude. What if we put together a team and we had a bunch of checks and balances? I'll tell some to some and some to another. Maybe you have a Zoom call and you all can put it together and see how it all fits.
As Kevin said, that would be the Talmud. Is your rabbinic?
Oh, that would be the Talmud, wouldn't it? Yeah, they've tried that. It's called the Talmud. They've tried it again. It was called the New Testament. No, that won't work. Well, somebody said, well, you know, there's like 40 prophets in the Old Testament, so God obviously likes to speak through many different people. One at a time, dude. No. Okay. What God says here is they will no longer teach one another as one individual man to his fellow countrymen. That's not going to happen anymore. Torah goes inside, and you still need a teacher because people just don't understand it. And oh, by the way, we're now dealing with this remnant because you're dealing with individual men and their countrymen, brothers, not necessarily covenant members at this point. And it says be no teaching that one person teaches another. Not going to happen that way. Going to be one teacher. That's what it says. Going to be one teacher. There you go. That's your teacher. I don't know, but maybe be 40 of these books by that time. Maybe keep on writing and we have 40 plus 40. I'm not nowhere close to being run out of material. It's going to be one teacher. That's what God just said. I didn't choose God's format. When I'm, laughing and making fun here about God choosing one person and running with them, and I'd be the first to tell you that God ought to have been able to do much better than me. I've got no problem admitting that. But the fact is, he didn't. So here we are. And now he is acknowledging what we have written, Yahowah. And that's what he's going with. Does that make Yahowah perfect? Nope. Will it ever be perfect? Nope. Does God want it to be perfect? Nope. Well, because the whole purpose is to teach through Yahowah. Yahowah can't teach unless the guy composing Yahowah is learning and growing and setting an example of how you correct mistakes. That the whole excitement of this is to get to where we are now, where every day is a new affirmation of something profoundly wonderful. so that it's always fresh and exciting. So when God said, let's go to talking to my people for a while. And what I did, because it just integrated now into nature, I couldn't stop translating and writing. I couldn't go to full-time talking to the microphone. I got enough material to do like 5 billion shows, but that's not my nature. I couldn't stop it. It was like lifeblood to me. And so what I ended up doing is the last book I wrote, for example, Time of Trouble, I wrote that entire book for a singular purpose, to provide new material for the show so that when we're doing the Yahowah vlog, it is as stimulating and as current for me as it is for you, and it builds on top of everything we've learned. And now I'm so into it that I'm writing 2 books simultaneously, Coming Home 4 and 5. And it is the joy of the day. It is why I take the 2 days off every week, and that's all I do is the translation and the interpretation. And it's exciting. And it is creating something that is exemplary, in the sense that this is a teaching role where the teacher acts in the role. And with all good teachers, they must first be good learners. And to be a good learner, you have to build a base of knowledge, and then you make the proper connections to go from knowing to understanding. And then you derive the proper applications and means of conveyance, and you share what you learn. And the more you share what you learn as a teacher, the more you come to own that material, the more you come to understand that material, the deeper your grasp of it becomes. So they will not teach any longer as an individual man to his fellow countrymen and companion, nor as an individual person to his brother. Not going to happen that way. Instead, God says, you want to be among those who approach? Say, choose of your own accord to Yahowah. Yahowah. Right there, black and white, as Rich says. Decide to recognize and acknowledge Yahowah through Yahowah. Demonstrate the desire to become familiar with and understand Yahowah. Respecting and selecting Yahowah. Call, imperative, second person, masculine, plural, exclamation point. I'm not sure the exclamation point was actually in the Hebrew, but it seemed fitting. For indeed, every one of them, they will come to know me, being like Yada with me. As a result, so first, before we go to anything else, that is what we have right here. That means this is the textbook of tomorrow. That means that the library that is presented at yahowah.com, all free, all 35 books now, there'll be 40, I'm sure, before we're all done, at least. All of that is available to you free, as well as all of the vlogs, well over 1,000 of them now, that we have done on these books, as well as all of the analysis that is shared on that site, including the timeline and the translations. All of that library becomes the home of Yahweh's name. The library of Yahowah. For you too, Yahowah. Here I was inspired years and years ago to entitle these books Yahowah. And here in the single most important prophecy regarding the reaffirmation of the covenant and this transition to forevermore, God says, you're not going to teach one-on-one anymore. No, you're all going to choose to Yahowah. You know, I may say these books need lots of improvement, and they do, and that they could be better than they are, and that's true. They are still better than anything that has existed in the past 3,500 years relative to the Word of God. They aren't better than the Torah. They're not better than the prophet Yahowah. They're not better than the Mizmor. They're just comprehensive of all of them. And they just don't report what they say. They explain it in such a way that you can yada Yahowah and become part of the Bereth covenant as a result. You can go from yada Yahowah to having the Torah written inside of you. But according to God, you can't get there without yada Yahowah. You want to be among those that Yahweh writes his Torah inside. And the answer and the means is yada Yahowah. Forever? No. Back, 30 years, it didn't exist. And 1,000 years from now may make no difference. But over this next 1,007 years, you want to have the Torah written inside of you? You want to be covenant? Then choose to yada Yahowah. That's why Kevin says, we can do these shows. It can be inclusive and invite people into the covenant, but we're running out of time for people to read the books to the point that they can actually act upon it in a way that demonstrates they're worthy of God making a decision to elevate them in dimensions and making them eternal. And he's right. If you were to devote 3 hours to reading the Yada Yahowah series every day, it would take a full year to get through them. And I don't think there's any active member of the covenant family who's only read these books once. Now, he went on to say, and this is really interesting, that for indeed, every one of them, they will know me, being like Yada with me, as a result of their katan. La men katan him. Have you ever heard the word katan before? Where does Yahweh introduce the concept of a katan? You really have to get out of the first chapter of Genesis. Yep. First chapter of the Torah. The lesson of the first chapter of the Torah is there is a gadol and a katan, and they are both ma'or. They're luminaries. The katan is the younger of the two, the lesser of the two. The gadol is the greater of the two. Although Yahweh says they're both great. Don't get me wrong. They're both gadol. But one's younger than the other. By a lot, it turns out, 600 years. Not that 600 years is going to mean a lot going forward in time, but by 600 years. Katan. As a result of their katan. Katan is the term that is used very infrequently, but it's used most demonstrably when Yahweh said the Gadol and Katan Mayor, luminaries, will serve as volunteers to fulfill the Moedim, Pesach Matzah B'Kudim, Shabua Teruah, Kapurim, and Sukkah. So, wouldn't it be interesting if Yada Yahowah was written by the Katan, the lesser luminary? What do you think? As an ad, as a restoring witness to the eternal testimony of their Gadol, he is professing the virtues of the Gadol. Gadol is a match set with Catan, isn't it? Do you think it's just maybe a coincidence that in this restoration of the covenant and the very end, when God says they're not going to teach each other anymore, they're going to go to Yahowah, and that the Torah will be written inside of those who are covenant, that it's going to be as a result of the Catan serving as a restoring witness to the Gadol, and that just happens to be two terms I thought I'd throw them out here just for fun and see if anybody catches it. Or maybe this is the ultimate prophecy, that it helps to explain in what is one of the most important prophecies throughout the Nabiim, that great prophecy on the fourth day of creation, where Yahweh presents the Gadol and the Catan Mayor. I'm not a fan of coincidences when it comes to Yahweh. He is way too good at this storytelling. Yirmiyah 31:34. You know, I have translated this so many times, but until your eyes are open and you realize, like, I'm writing a book right now. I told you two. And one of those two books, I said, I think we just got to go back to the beginning from the basics, because what it appears to me is that God is trying to tell you that the greater and lesser luminaries, the Gadol and the Catan Mayor, that the story revolves around them. And even that's a bit indulgent, because it's not quite true. The story revolves around the Gadol Mayor. And every life and every lyric that has ever been lived or uttered by the Catan is in advancing and explaining and supporting and extolling the merit of the Gadol Mayor. Dod. Yeah, I've told you, this is my seventh life. All of them for a single purpose: support God's beloved Son. He doesn't ever want him left alone. Support him, care for him, encourage him. That, by the way, is the story of Ruth and Boaz, which is why it's so interesting that you would see them. But having gone back to the beginning and entitled the book on Mayor, and I'm now rewriting even the beginning of this book, going through every reference to the sun and the moon working together as a team, and what happens even when they are darkened in the end, and why they would be darkened in the end before the glorious day of Yahweh, when they become brilliant again. It is the central chord of God's story. And here it is in Yirmiyah 31. How do you like that, folks? So before we move on, I'll read those two things again, because I don't know what I could tell you that would be more important than this message. For this reason, this is the covenant, which, to enjoy the benefits of the relationship, I will cut and establish with the house of Yisrael. After that, and without hesitation in the end, prophetically declares Yahweh, I will provide, placing my Torah, my guidance and teaching, within them, and integrated into their ability to make decisions. I will write it. I will be their God. They will be my family. It was Yirmiyah 31:33. They will not teach any longer as an individual man to his fellow countryman, nor companion, nor as an individual person to his brother. to approach, say, choose of your own accord to Yahowah. For indeed, every one of them will come to know me, being like Yada with me. As a result of their katan, as the ad restoring witness to the eternal testimony of their gadol, prophetically reveals in advance of it occurring, Yahweh. If you're a newbie and this is the first program that you have heard, I have just spoken this far above your head. Wasn't my intent, but that is what has just been stated. Nevertheless, there are nuggets here that you can gain from and benefit from, like going to Yahowah now, Yahowah.com or Yahowah.com, whichever your preference, and begin reading. That's God's advice to you at this time. If you have listened to the last several months of programs and you've come to have a better appreciation of who the Gadol and Katan Mayor are, as the trees of lives and of knowledge and of their collaboration throughout time, then what I have just shared with you should be exceedingly affirming, reassuring that God knew exactly where this was leading. And he laid it all out for us to find and share 2,800 years ago. So when set into the most declarative statement regarding the final restoration of the covenant with Yisrael, circa year 6000 Yah, this prophetic pronouncement becomes the preeminent summation of Yahweh's plan and the ultimate affirmation of God's chosen implements. Through him, he will engender that plan. As he told us in the first book of the Torah, the Gadol Mayor and the Katan Mayor collaborate. One reflects the other's light. They are the two men who fulfill the Moedim. They're signs from which you can learn. And now we know that the Gadol Mayor is king. The Katan Mayor is teacher. This will be the ongoing condition that will be experienced by all who are fortunate enough to be among the surviving remnant of the chosen people during that 1,000-year period. I don't know what God has in store for us beyond that, other than it will be extraordinary. But I do know what our job will be and what yours will be going forward. Now, that's not to say that this individual is going to work alone. You know, again, I'm referring to this letter that's just so odd today, how we have to collaborate, and that I should even work with conspiratorial types because they're the most observant. Excuse me. No, thank you. Here's reality. There's nothing that God has ever asked us to do that can be done alone. And while we are in these physical bodies on this planet, it also requires support of others beyond just Yahweh. Even Adam, God said, wasn't good for him to be alone. And even when he was cast out of the garden, in the last 300 years of his life, he gave him Chinook. Moshe wasn't alone. Noah wasn't alone. Abraham wasn't alone. They were never all alone. Dowd wasn't alone. And so what you find, and this is important, is that when we experience the Shabuah, the Teruah harvest, and enter Sukkah, that God speaks of an eight. Eight for infinity, but there's 8 individuals. And so that's called the management team that is going to enable all of this. I don't work alone now. There is a team that supports all of this. And that team were essential. If that team were to say, okay, I've done my thing, I've got other thing, I want to go, improve my golf, this would come to a crashing halt. It can't be done alone. And so God supplies what is needed to get the job done. That said, God's style is we're going to go with a team leader. Now, returning to this topic, obviously there's going to be no religious alternatives, no political infighting, no spurious claims of authority or for authority. There's not going to be a Miriam saying, we too speak for God. And there'll be no ongoing or prolonged disagreements. There'll be no infighting over who's in charge. There'll be no arguments over interpretation. There will be no sects, no cults, no parties, no false prophets, no misleading teachers, no contrary interpretations, no antagonism, no conspiracies. There is one God by one name, Yahowah. There is one source of guidance, the Torah. There is one prescription for living, Yada Yahowah. There is one king. He is the Gadol Mayor. There is one teacher. He is the Katan Mayor. There is one people, Yisrael. This result is to be delivered by a single odd witness in collaboration with Yahweh himself, and that collectively they will restore Yahweh's name. They will reinforce the preeminence of his Torah. They will correctly convey the inscribed conditions of the covenant. They will reestablish respect for our king. And they will reunite Israel. And he, as the Katan Mayor, will do so through the Moedim, his father, brother, co-worker, and beneficiary of the Gadol Mayor. True to his word and to his nature, Yahweh will accomplish all of this through his chosen implements. I can honestly say that I did not get this job because I was at the head of a long line or that I was the best possible choice. You see, there was no line. There was no other choice. And that's not a tribute to me. It's an indictment on most everyone else. No one else was willing to listen. So Yahweh is now a proud father. He is a delighted God. He has been proven right, even if by the narrowest of margins. We humans were worth the effort. We were capable of being observant, of being responsive, of being reliable. The story of the garden manifest in these concluding words. Jews will no longer teach Jews because they will be listening to Yada. The Talmud would no longer exist because Yahowah will serve as the means to comprehend and apply the Torah's guidance. Hashem will be abandoned for the Shem of our God, Yahweh. This is the resolution of the 3 instructions that Yahweh engraved on the first tablet. Yahweh will have liberated his people from all forms of oppression and from false gods. There will be no trace of religion, and fathers will no longer corrupt their sons with false teaching. Thousands will receive Yahweh's mercy. They will bask in his love by accepting his prescriptions for living. And as a result of his Torah and of Yahowah, helping to make it relevant to everyone's life, God's name will no longer be hidden. It will not be erased. It will not be forgotten. It will not be disparaged. Now, over the past year, I have transitioned in my approach and my thinking. You probably all noticed that. I no longer see the library comprising Yahowah at yahowah.com or the Yahowah blog as a means to recruit covenant members. There is no longer enough time for anyone new to learn what must be known to mature and grow into effective and responsible children of the covenant, to the extent that an individual can prove themselves trustworthy. Further, there isn't a suitable forum to share God's message because social media platforms have all become havens for the most troubling expressions of religion, politics, conspiracy, militancy, indoctrination, subjugation, control, and anti-Semitism. I have determined and I have shared that our purpose at this point in time is to build the covenant family, and to do so at yahowah.com. Doing this to lead Israelites and Goyim through the time of trouble and into the millennial celebration of Sukkah, where then it becomes the library for the remnant of Israel. Obviously, Yahweh concurs. The problem with Jews has been that the wrong people have been teaching the wrong material. While the yeshiva is case in point, rabbis feed the Haredi out of their Talmud and train them to be useless and antagonistic parasites, irritating Yahweh. Therefore, having learned nothing of value over the past 3,500 years, the time of Jews teaching Jews is over, at least with God. Those who have been afforded the opportunity to approach Yahweh at this time, and especially those gathered by him on Teruah for Kippurim in advance of Sukkah, will be universally receptive and will have chosen to Yahowah. This is now the charter for the returning remnant of Israel. It's where they will find their invitation. A time is soon to come, just 7 years from this program, when everyone who survives will come to recognize, acknowledge, and appreciate Yahowah. There will be no exceptions. So in 4 pronouncements, Jeremiah 31 through 34, Yahowah has disclosed where we're headed, how we're going to get there, and what will transpire when we are as one. He has brought us full circle, right back to the garden, with the Gadol Meor as the tree of lives and the Katan Meor as the tree of knowledge. The Choder will have served his purpose. He will be, as Yeshaya 11 says, Etzah, Dayath, the tree that represents the comprehensive knowledge and respect for Yah. The king will be restored to prominence, and Yahowah is smiling. Now, in a particularly relevant disclosure, this will be the result of the Katan, who was serving as the ad, restoring witness to the Gadol. This is because Yahowah wants to bring some humans back to where we began in the midst of his creation account. Therefore, even prior to this narrative on the garden, Yahowah explained what he was going to do through his Katan Meor and his Gadol Meor. And so now upon our return to the garden, we find them touting Yada Yahowah on behalf of the returnees. Here I thought I was writing it to encourage the Teruah and Shabua harvests. And now I find that God's affirming that this website where the library is presented, these vlog programs are accessed, yadayah.com, and the whole Yada Yahowah series is in fact the library for the celebration of Sukkah. It's there on behalf of the returnees. This is God's plan. He said it in black and white. It's not going to change. So now that you know what's going to happen, with whom, when, why it will occur, I trust that you will be among the celebrants. I look forward to seeing you on Shabua or thereafter en route to Teruah. Now, I'm going to share this next statement, but we'll begin here in our next program. I just want to throw it out as something for you to think about, because it brings us to the references right now to the sun and the moon. And I suspect that you're going to be surprised by what Yahowah has to say about them. As shocking as all of this has been to our system up to this point, here and now. Yahowah says, I have provided the brilliance of the sun to approach the light in the day, sharing the engraved inscriptions of the conditions to be cut into the covenant relationship by the moon and these heavenly powers to approach the light in the day. I am stirring up and bringing repose by way of the sea, so that his waves roar while abundantly enriching the multitude. Yahowah of the vast array of spiritual implements is his name. So what now are the chances that the Khatan and the Mayor and the Khatan Mayor and that the Gadol Mayor aren't the same symbols of the sun and the moon in Genesis 4 or Genesis 1? And God has, on the fourth day of creation, and God has brought all of this to fruition for you right now so that you might understand the source of his instructions, the central cast of his plan, and how he is offering not only redemption, but the knowledge of it as well. Pretty astonishing, isn't it? Well, that's the conclusion of our program on the basics here on Yahowah's Name for this program, the eighth in our series. We will return to this material as we press on to establish all that can be known and appreciated about the name above all names, the name of our God, Yahowah. Thank you for listening.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch Yao on our next podcast.